I'm going to say something a bit controversial,
Okay.
and that is the Gen Z group is probably the first disadvantaged generation relative to the generation before them. I'm super ordinary. What would help me in my career as an ordinary person is making right decisions.
Okay. So for our very first episode of Calm Street Business, we're honored to have a very special guest, a fellow Sauder alumnus and the head of assessment and finance, as well as the CFO of WorkSafeBC, Mark Heywood. Please welcome Mark to the Calm Street podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm very excited to meet soon-to-be alumni one day.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you so much for coming to be our first guest. We're very honored to have you, especially to have someone with a lot of expertise in the field and also as a Sauder alum. I think we could get a lot of experience from your experience here at Sauder. Okay. And I think we'll move on to our first question. I
Sure.
think our first question is, who or what outside of work made you the person you are today?
Who outside of work made me the person? Well, this may sound like a predictable answer, but my father was key. My father spent 30 years in the RCMP and then started up a management consulting firm. And he instilled in me incredibly important values about leadership. And one of them was uh, look after the people you work with and get to know them, and don't be afraid of failure.
Right.
And those are things that I've always lived by because those are the things that actually I think have been critical to my success. Actually, it's also one of the things I think that the current generation coming into the workforce is struggling with. And I'll expand a little bit about that in the sense that, since COVID and that, with the social isolation that brought on and social media and online focus that a lot of people have had, is taken away a little bit from the social skills and interaction side of things. And I think the generation's also been a little bit more fearful of failure. I think it's being frowned upon and not supported, but failure is actually a really important part of success. It's how you learn and how you grow. And I think people need to be proud of their failures because people who fail are people who succeed.
Right. No, I definitely understand that. As someone who went through the COVID period, especially when I was still in high school, I think failure was definitely something I was very scared of.
Mhm.
Even now in university, I think I'm still learning to adapt to it. But I think I definitely agree that it's a big skill that we have to be comfortable with and also get to grow from it.
Well, what you'll find is early in your career, what you bring to the table is important because as an individual, that's all you got. But as you move up into your career, it's not what you bring to the table, it's who you bring to the table
Right.
because that'll become your ticket to success, the team that you can bring along. And that's going to require those social skills and that networking capabilities.
Exactly. Perfect. And then the next question we have for you is like, what is one thing that about yourself that you wish other people know about you? Whether that be some failures in your past or some of your success stories, like anything you want to share with us?
Oh, wow. Lots of stories. Well, the one thing actually, if I were talking to my peers or people I've worked with in the past, is that I have a much larger care and love for them than they actually appreciate. And I'll explain that. And the reason why I explain it is because um, liking someone and being nice to someone isn't loyalty necessarily. They're nice, but it isn't loyalty. So what's real loyalty is, and things that you need to do is having that honest conversation with the people you work with. And sometimes that means being uncomfortable. A lot of people don't want to take that step and be uncomfortable with their friends that they're loyal to because they're actually loyal to their feelings, not to the individual. And their decisions are based on protecting their own feelings, when in actual fact, they should get uncomfortable and have those uncomfortable truths. But I've had those uncomfortable truths with many people, and I think they've succeeded because of it. But at the time, it may not have felt nice. But
Mhm.
what they need to know, it was loyal. And behind that is because the care that I had for them in my interactions with them.
Right.
The other thing about me as a person, I'm not by any means an extraordinary person. I've done well in my career, and I'm very proud of what I've done. It's not I'm not a Steve Jobs. I'm not a Bill Gates. I don't have any superpowers. I'm super ordinary. What would help me in my career as an ordinary person was making right decisions, and that's something I think that everybody and your listeners can actually do. So the advice you might get from reading Steve Jobs' autobiography is great if you have his personality, but there aren't that many of them around.
Right.
What you need to do is learn what ordinary people do, like myself. And I think I've done quite well, but again, not because I have super skills, but because I learned the art of networking, caring about people, and learning basically how to interact and actually managing my own emotions and my own skill sets.
Right.
Anybody can do that.
Exactly. I kind of had more questions about like the uncomfortable conversations
Sure.
you would have with people. How would you navigate your own emotions through those uncomfortable situations? Because I think a lot of people, they get it on the receiving end, but even when you're giving that uncomfortable conversation, you have to navigate your own emotions and your own uncomfortability, right?
Right.
So how did you navigate that yourself?
So if you're having to give uncomfortable news, you have to plan it and you have to have a script because when you're emotional, if you don't have a script, then you get driven by your emotions. So it's really important to plan these conversations out. But in terms of me being uncomfortable, I got a great story. So early in my career at WorkSafeBC, I was asked to do a presentation. Being young, I felt like I had a business case to produce. It wasn't a particularly a difficult business case. It should have been a slam dunk. And it was my first presentation in front of the senior executive committee. And I went up and presented it and I tanked it. I was absolutely destroyed. I was completely uncomfortable about that. I was devastated. In actual fact, I was actually thinking I should get another job. The CFO at the time, who I worked for, knew I was going to fail.
Really?
He did not stop me. And the reason why he didn't want to stop, he knew I was young in my career. He knew I was a bit overconfident
Right.
and I wasn't really focused on the right thing. So what he did is he took me aside and says, "Well, you learned something, didn't you?" And I said, "I did." And says, "That was incredibly uncomfortable." It's good. Get used to being uncomfortable. The way you will succeed is being comfortable with being uncomfortable, being comfortable with being afraid. Fear is not a bad thing.
Right.
Controlling your fear is the key. But people who avoid being uncomfortable don't succeed. And so I wanted you to have a very uncomfortable experience to realize you survived. You will come back and fight again, and you will learn how to do it better. And I did that same presentation a few months later, and it's fine.
Wow.
But that was an important lesson.
Right, right. Because it definitely helped you grow and like improve,
Absolutely.
right? Exactly. Okay. And then like that kind of segues into our next question that we had for you.
Sure.
Like, what were some big challenges or obstacles that you felt that made you into the person you are today, like helped you grow?
Challenges or decisions?
Mm, we could do both. We have time for that.
Okay. So, I went to Sauder and I did the accounting and management information system designation, and I was going to be a solid, accountant. I went to article at Deloitte. I got my job at WorkSafeBC, working initially at the internal audit department, and went into finance. And then my boss said, "We need someone to run purchasing."
Oh,
And I kind of looked at him and going, "That wasn't really in my career plans."
right.
And so this is where my father came into it. I actually called up my father. He said, "They offered me a manager in procurement." And I said, "Should I take it?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Why?" He says, "They asked you to do it. If you say no, that won't look good. Second of all, they know you know nothing about procurement. They see something in you. There's a reason why they want you in that job. So take it and find out. It's an experience. No one will ask you to be a manager of procurement again. You can always go into finance at any point in time. You got that. When will you have an opportunity to gain that skill?" So I did. And I was told to do it for 3 months. I ended up doing it for 3 years.
Wow.
And I used my financial skills to re-engineer the procurement department from a financial perspective, which what they were looking for. And it turned out to be a great opportunity because it demonstrated to the people I worked with the versatility of my skill set. Being typecasted is really dangerous.
Right.
So getting those experiences that allow you to go out of your normal script is an awesome opportunity to increase the value that you offer.
Right. Wow. Like I'm so shocked at the fact that like they knew you didn't know anything about procurement, but they just saw it in you. And I think that might have been like a big driving force for just helping you grow, right?
But I didn't have to take it, and if I hadn't done it, I probably wouldn't be the CFO today.
Right.
So that was pretty important decision. It didn't seem that important at the time, but I look back at it, that was important.
Right. Wow. And then you mentioned Deloitte and since you're at WorkSafe BC right now, like I think that the next question I would have is like, what attracted you to both companies? Like, what did you see in yourself for the two companies in Deloitte and WorkSafe BC?
Well, Deloitte's actually, I mean, at the time you put your resume in, and I had about maybe 3 firms to pick from. I just connected with the people that I interviewed with, and quite honestly, I think they offered me $500 a month more than the other one, so that kinda got me into it. I went in as a summer student. It was actually a pre-art one,
Oh, right.
and so, I enjoyed working for them. They offered a great training program for the CA program.
Mhm.
What was really, useful, though, attracted to that organization, they had a strong internal audit function.
Oh,
They as a practice.
right.
So most CA firms, actually CPA firms now, they're a CA firms back then,
Right.
they offered mostly consulting, taxation, insolvency, and auditing,
Right.
like external auditing. But they had an internal audit practice, and to me, that was more exciting because while I enjoyed being a CPA,
Mhm.
I was more interested in learning about operational efficiencies and effectiveness. And the internal audit is more in that line of sight. I thought that was more useful. So it gave me an opportunity to learn the field at Deloitte.
Oh, okay. And so you've definitely used some of that knowledge at Deloitte and then moved it to WorkSafeBC, right? I'm
Right.
assuming, yeah.
Because my first job at WorkSafeBC was internal audit.
Right, exactly. And so what drew you to WorkSafeBC specifically for internal audit?
Well, it's interesting. One is because they had the internal audit option. The other actually was more just the opportunity. They had an internal audit department, and I didn't know much about WorkSafeBC. In hindsight, I'm glad I went there because WorkSafeBC is a not-for-profit government agency.
Right.
But what's really important is the work that they stand for.
Mhm.
They make the difference in injured workers, and they protect injured workers. So the cause of working for that organization and being able to apply my profession to that organization is actually quite satisfying. Yes, I don't get stock tips or dividends or anything like that, but I work for an organization that has a very noble cause, and that actually makes the going to work every day, 33 years, quite valuable to me.
Right. And so the culture I would assume is very different compared to like a for-profit company. And so like, how would you say like the culture is at WorkSafeBC? Like what do you see as like the prime benefit that like students can gain from the culture at WorkSafeBC?
Well, first of all, the key aspect of what WorkSafeBC is when you think about it, what profession do you think that WorkSafeBC hires?
Mm.
Do you have any idea?
What profession?
When you work for a bank, you think of bankers. You work
Right.
for an investment house, you think of investment people. So at WorkSafeBC, who do you think we hire?
Oh, I would think it's more like people who are customer service based, who are communications based, since they're communicating with people who are injured or the workplace that they were injured at. That's my assumption.
So yes, we hire all those people.
Right.
We hire HR, we hire IT people, we hire facilities people, we hire lawyers, we hire doctors, we hire dentists, we hire pharmacists, we hire engineers,
Right.
we hire marketing people,
Mhm.
social media people. You can pretty much think of almost any profession, physiotherapists,
Right.
those type of. It's a whole spectrum of people. People in the film industry, we actually have people that do film in there and art design stuff like that. We have an entire spectrum of people that work there. So one of the excellent aspects about working at WorkSafe BC, if you want exposure to other types of careers,
Mhm.
you have a great opportunity to do that there.
Right.
Like moving to procurement, for example.
Exactly. And how do you think students can always benefit from this like this diverse culture at WorkSafe DC? And are there any opportunities that you want to highlight for our guests?
Well, we hire some co-op students, I think, 3 times a year,
Right.
and there's quite a large number. I don't have the exact number, but we're probably one of the larger co-op programs for many companies in the Lower Mainland. So we hire in finance, we hire in IT, we hire in claims, we hire in healthcare,
Mhm.
we hire in very different areas, in various different professions. We hire in the marketing department and the stakeholder relations department. So whatever field you're in, there's probably a co-op opportunity there for you, and I would take advantage of it. They offer excellent pay, benefits, education, and we have a very high retention rate for co-op students that actually work in our organization.
Right. No, because I definitely saw like the job openings
Yeah,
on WorkSafe DC, and I was looking at it. I'll try to apply to some tonight.
no, absolutely.
Hopefully, I'll be able to enjoy the diverse culture and learn from it. And I guess that kind of moves on to our next question
Sure.
here, where like from your experience,
Mhm.
now that you've been in the workplace for a number of years now,
Right.
how do you think students and just employees in general can improve their recruitment success with prospective employers, whether that be networking or resume or cover letter?
Well, I hire a lot of people, and people who do that poorly is my pet peeve.
All right.
And it's important to understand why. For many positions, we could get hundreds of resumes. The biggest challenge you have is there's hundreds of you.
Mhm.
And if you look like everybody else, how do I pick you out of the pile?
Right.
So there's many different ways of doing that. Let's start before you even put the resume in. First of all, target the organization that you're looking for, research them. If you're going into, if you're applying in the finance department and you haven't looked at my website and looked at the annual report, why would I hire you?
Right.
If you're in the marketing department and you haven't looked at their marketing information or any of the stuff they publish, why would they hire you? Just do that research. So many people don't do that. The next thing is find out key players in the organization. If you have an opportunity to go to any of the the co-op events that we attend, meet the people there, get to know their names, leave your name there, do that networking, make yourself memorable, so that when they're going through the pile, yeah, I met that guy at the co-op program, and maybe we should take a look at it. Uh, that's important. Your resume, you know, don't do font 8, okay? Don't do 8 pages, 2 pages, lots of space, and don't go into great detail about the paper route you did when you were 12 years old. Most relevant information on top, and as you move down, least relevant. Volunteer. Get that on your resume. Show that you've demonstrated your leadership. At your age, you haven't run organizations, you don't have a lot of experience, but you have opportunities, like whether it's in your church or the community center or stuff like that, to be in leadership roles. Do that and demonstrate that in your covering letter or in your resume that you've had that experience, because a lot of people don't. And the moment we see that, we pull that up, that makes us curious. You want to get us curious. So
Right.
you need things on the resume that make you curious. And the most important thing is tailor your covering letter for the job. Tell me about you, how you are best for that job, and draw direct lines to that job. Don't give me a generic covering letter that you send to every other person that's exactly the same. I can read those and I see no linkage, and out goes your resume.
Right.
The other key thing though is in the actual resume, don't write it like a job description. Don't tell me all the things you did. I know all those jobs. I've probably done some of them. I don't need to know what your job description is. What I want to know is how you added value in each of those jobs. And one of the things I always suggest to people when they write a resume
Mhm.
is list up a bunch of adjectives that describe the right person for the job you're applying for. They need to be team player. They need to be, they need to be organized. They need to be intellectual. They need to be, um, you know, uh, thoughtful, whatever. Get those words down, write them out. And then as you go through your resume, every line should try to identify one of those adjectives. When someone reads it, they go, oh, look, he's organized. Oh, look, he can think outside the box. Oh, look, he's got great interpersonal skills. Oh, look, he's led teams. And that tells me something about the individual. And most people don't do that. When I see that, that makes me interested in you. And all of a sudden that resume goes to the top.
Right. And so this is a personal curiosity, and,
Sure.
and like I know it's not a pre-prep question, but could you tell us a little bit about like what's on your resume? Like, what do you put on your resume that you think makes you stand out?
Well, to be honest, the last job I did probably takes up is probably the majority of my experience because it has the most relevant experience.
Right.
The fact that I was a procurement manager won't help me get the next CFO job.
Mhm.
Okay, but what I have there is going to be everything on that. But it's again, it's those adjectives. It's the fact that I run an organization, and I have interpersonal skills, networking skills, and I'm fluent in the skill sets that I need. Um, it's pretty hard to describe. I don't have it in front of you, but and the other, of course, the other thing is I haven't actually applied for a job for quite some time, so my resume would need to be updated.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I guess okay, this is going back to a little bit before the whole resume
Sure.
question. It's about like key decisions because you were talking about
Mhm.
hiring, and we wanted to know a little bit more about your position at WorkSafe. Like, what are some key decisions that you have to make day to day, and what are some softer skills that you might have to use on the day to day
Oh,
in
yeah.
your workplace?
Great. So key decisions, probably the most important decision that anybody in my position makes is who you hire,
Right.
because your team matters. Basically, when I started off at WorkSafeBC, the value I brought to the table is what I brought to the table. Right now, the value I bring to WorkSafeBC is what my team brings to WorkSafeBC. Effectively, I don't do anything. What I do is I enable my team to do everything.
Mhm.
And that's the value I bring to the organization. So having the right people is absolutely the most important, which means, when someone's not performing, you may need to move them into a different role, potentially outside the organization. Most of the time, you're just trying to find the right role for them. Everybody has the right spot to be in. Sometimes they're not in the right spot, you move them to that.
Right.
Those are the key decisions. But more, if you're looking for more, what are the business decisions I make? Well, determining the rates for WorkSafe BC absolutely critical. I'm trying to appease employers
Mhm.
who need insurance coverage, but if I charge too high, they're going to be upset.
Right.
If I don't charge a sufficient amount, then the accident fund that funds all the workers' pensions and claims payments wouldn't be sufficient, and their benefits wouldn't be sufficient. And so, if they would like the employers to pay more, employers would like to pay less. Workers would like to have more benefits. So I have to determine a methodology to ensure that I charge. The way I like to look at it, I have to make them both equally unhappy in order to make everybody happy.
Right. Exactly. And like, how much do you think that those skills were attributable to your education at Sauder? Or do you think a lot more of it was like learning on the job and learning from your mentors at WorkSafe than like your previous experiences?
I think it's all of the above. The experience, understanding the market. The most important thing when I'm dealing with stakeholders is that I can't come across as favoring any of the stakeholders. I can't be pro-employer and pro-worker. I'm pro-system. I am objective, and they need to trust the information. And so having the social skills and gain that trust to how you behave is critically important. But having the financial background and the competence and the skill sets you have that you can demonstrate is absolutely important for them to believe the information. If any of those things are missing, then the stakeholders would not have confidence in the information and doing, and then as a result, the system would suffer.
Right.
So that's absolutely critical in the role.
Exactly. Perfect. And then I know you mentioned your father at the start of the
Right.
interview, and we wanted to know more. Like, do you have any other mentors that you thought were like really significant to your journey?
Well, actually, I'm gonna throw a twist.
Okay.
So I've had great bosses,
Mhm.
and I've had bosses that, from a textbook, nice people,
Right.
but we're not what I would call highly skilled bosses. And what's interesting is I actually suggest to you that you learn as much from the less capable bosses as you do from the great bosses.
Really?
Great bosses, you learn by observation, and you get to see what they do, and you can absorb it. That's great. I had a boss that was, you might say, was sort of weak in his role. And so, but those bosses gave me an opportunity to extend my work into his area because he relied on me providing that information. He wasn't a CPA,
Right.
but he was the corporate controller at the time. He relied on me having to have the technical skills. But he also was an introvert. So
Mm.
he relied on me to have the networking skills and to have interact with various different departments. So I got to work at almost in his role without being in his role.
Right.
Now, yes, I didn't get paid for his job, but I eventually got his job
Oh.
because by the time when he retired, I was looked at as a natural successor. So and the one is I got the skill sets I learned by actually practicing at a level above my pay grade taught me how to be at that pay grade. Which means if you have a demonstrated record of operating at above your pay grade, you're more likely to get that job than someone who's never demonstrated that ability. So the bosses that sometimes struggle is an opportunity for you to shine and to extend into their area of responsibility and demonstrate and learn their job, which will then get you ahead of your competition into that role.
Right. Exactly. And that kind of is a nice pivot, anyways,
Right.
because the next question that we had planned was like, were there any key opportunities that you thought like was not as appreciated at the time, but now looking back, you would have regretted it if you missed it, or you would have had some other uh, journey if you didn't
Mhm.
take it? Like, were there any key moments like that?
Well, the procurement role was one that absolutely helped in terms of providing me an opportunity to demonstrate my skills differently. The other key decision was before I left internal audit and when I had an opportunity, I was offered two jobs, being the manager of internal audit or become a manager in finance. So that was a key decision. At that time, I actually had been most of my career as an internal audit. I could have stayed. I could have been comfortable. It was, if you think about it, I was going into a role in the financial area that I knew nothing about
Right.
at that time because I was quite young. I was very confident. I'd spent 4 years in internal audit, and now I got to go into a role that in a field that I had been in for 4 years, but slightly a step up. Very comfortable. Could have done it. Paid the same.
Oh.
But I chose the job I knew less because it was uncomfortable. And if it was uncomfortable, I knew I'd learn more.
Right.
And I didn't want to do more of the same. Again, if I hadn't made that decision at that time and focused on, well, no, I'm getting paid the same. Why wouldn't I do a job that I can do? It's more easier and wouldn't have to work as hard. I could have made that decision and I wouldn't be sitting here today.
Right. Wow. So that key decision probably would have changed your entire
Right.
trajectory now, even into possibly WorkSafeBC with a completely different path.
Right.
Right.
No, absolutely.
Or were there any more recent examples at WorkSafeBC, for example, that you thought were really underappreciated?
So before I became the corporate controller, 8 years prior to that, I applied to be the corporate controller against a colleague of mine that was almost 100% certain going to get the job.
Oh.
And people asked me, why did I apply for that job if you knew you were going to get it? I said, well, I might get it. And my excuse to my friend who was applying for it, who was actually older than me, is that I didn't want it to be a coronation for him.
Yes.
So that's why I did it. The real reason why I did it was that, it's like it was a Hail Mary pass. If I make the Hail Mary pass, I'm the corporate controller, success, nothing less. if I don't get the opportunity, but I can demonstrate my desire and at least my competence and could have done the job,
Mhm.
it would, and I can give that to the audience above me. It raised my profile. So it actually it benefited me to a great degree because the fact that I applied for it and demonstrated I could do it, but the other individual got it, put me in a position of, first of all, he was great, but he didn't get it, so now we have to be nice to him. So they were, in terms of my career, the organization was very generous to making sure that I was satisfied. Couldn't give you the job you wanted, but we want to make sure you're happy. We'll give you other opportunities that work to my advantage. And then when the job came up later, after he left, then I was able to move into the role with more certainty.
Right. I think whoever's listening, our listeners will know that I had a similar strategy for our student government roles. Ran for president, didn't get it, but the profile was high enough that ran it again this year and
Right.
we got it. So I think that strategy works for a lot of people too.
It was almost planned failure but to a benefit.
Right, exactly. And you learn, you get your profile, they remember you, and the second time it comes around, they already know that you're capable. So it saves a lot of time even for the other side as well, right?
Well, a lot of people look at those things. Well, if failure is not going to happen, if failure is going to happen, why would you do it?
Right,
Well, because it's not just about that.
right. And failure is never 100% guaranteed,
Right.
either, right?
Well, the other reason is sometimes if I didn't do the job very well, I'd rather fail at the attempt where I never had a chance for the job, so that I could learn how to do it right when I had a real chance.
Right.
So that's where failure is a benefit.
Right. Okay. Perfect. And then this is going to be our last little segment. It's
Sure.
going to be regarding your college years. If you could go back, was there anything that you could possibly do differently?
You know what? I actually did some things right, and I don't mean to be sort of sarcastic about that, but at the time I didn't know I did right. I took a bunch of courses. I took psychology, sociology, and philosophy as my non-commerce courses, and to get into commerce. And a lot of people didn't do that. And what I learned is that sociology taught me to understand people by understanding where they came from
Hmm.
and to understand their background, and that was really key to my job. Philosophy taught me the art of argument and to make business cases and to win your arguments and be convincing. And that turned out to be invaluable. Psychology told me how to deal with people with different personalities, how to get into their heads, how understand how people operate. Those three courses proved to be, quite honestly, more useful than some of the commerce courses I took, to be fair. But they were all dead, don't worry. But
Okay.
although I don't use a lot of stats personally, but that's another story. But those three foundational courses were absolutely essential to my leadership, and I'm glad I took those. So would I change this? No, I wouldn't do those differently. I'm glad I took. I would do those again if I had to start over again.
Right. Wow. No, because I'm taking some courses as well in like philosophy, law and society as well. And I definitely agree that they teach you a lot of the skills that you will require in your
Yeah.
workplace sooner or later.
Right.
Even though maybe sitting in class, you don't think it's the most worth it in terms of your tuition, but
Right.
it does pay off eventually, right?
Right. It does. It
And
does.
so our last question is, what do you think students should invest in right now? Like the world is always constantly changing. There's now the rise of AI. People are scared for their jobs.
Yeah.
There's rise of costs. So what do you think students should invest in to not only make themselves a successful candidate when they're applying for jobs, but just in terms of personal growth as well?
So I'm going to say something a bit controversial,
Okay.
and that is the Gen Z group is probably the first disadvantaged generation relative to the generations before them. They are less financially well off. Actually, they have less. They're less networking skills. Cognitively, they've actually had a bit of a challenging education system because of COVID and the advent of AI. Understand what your generation doesn't have and focus on developing those skills. So socialization skills, networking skills is not the strength. Make it your strength because if you have that, you're going to be above everybody else. Okay, that's absolutely good. Presentation skills are absolutely critical. Language skills are absolutely essential. Language skills, I think, has gotten weaker with technology and the way things are done. But even working with AI, having the ability to prompt properly and read things properly is a skill set that I think is actually lacking. I can't stand it when I get a resume with spelling mistakes. Just that basic skill set. So learn communication skills, learn those communication skills, learn your networking skills. Your network is your net worth in terms of developing your career. So pick up on that and don't be afraid to fail and get yourself out there. The one key thing I'll tell you is almost every job I ever that I actually got. And I worked at a number of companies. This Deloitte also worked at Pemberton, Houston, Willoughby, Greenlock Bell, which was an old investment house. Eventually got bought out by RBC.
Oh,
But almost every job I got, I never got the job by putting my resume in a pile. Now, sometimes you can still get jobs that way. I got it by finding different ways and through connections. And, in fact, actually, it was the more people you know, the more people realize who you are, where you fit, the more opportunities come to you. Your network's absolutely critical to getting your success.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's going to be who you bring to the table that is going to help you with your career.
and I think that was a perfect wrap up for our interview today. Thanks so much, Mark, and very grateful to have you again on Com Street Business. We're very grateful to get your advice, learn a lot more about your story, and I hope that our students will be able to connect with you in the future to learn more about you, see if they're able to work with you in the future. And I'm personally very grateful to have you as our first guest.
That was fun.
To learn from you. So
I'm honored to be your first.
yeah, thank you so much.
Fun. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.